This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 67.
The pandemic has brought with it a lot of reactive change. That is what we've observed in the way people learn and they perceive their careers. Many companies that we've observed over the last few months have had to alter their approach in the way they design people's learning journeys, in the way they design their careers, define productivity, build meaningful learning experiences, and at the same time be mindful about employees' mental health as well.
Welcome to the eLearning Podcast. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from lmspulse.com. My guest today is Hithakshi Kotyan, a senior learning and development specialist for Priceline. If you were or are a part of the travel industry, one of the hardest hit sectors during the global lockdowns, you faced some very serious issues over the past 24 months. Priceline is a very well-known brand in the travel sector. It's one of the companies under Booking's holdings, who also own brands like Booking.com and Kayak and Agoda. One thing that you'd assume a company like Priceline would reduce or likely eliminate in the COVID meltdown would be learning. And yet, as you'll hear from Hithakshi, it was easy to see how a huge player like this looked for the opportunity in the chaos. In this paradise destination of a conversation, Hithakshi and I talk about reactive change, or how exceptional times have the benefit of making something important truly urgent. In this context, that meant focusing on next-gen learning experiences. We also talk about why, in the middle of the Great Resignation, Priceline decided to expand its workforce as well as its learning and development initiatives. We also talk about the not really surprising links between creativity, learning, and leisure with on-the-job training and satisfaction. We also talk about why at Priceline, e-learning in 2022 means more networking and microlearning and less Zoom meetings. And then finally, we also talk about empowerment and diversity, aligning e-learning with core strategy, communities of practice at Priceline, and would you enroll your employees at an online course by Mensa? But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com and lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hello, Hithakshi. Welcome to the eLearning Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
Like I said, I'm on a vacation, and but I was looking for a conversation today with you.
Oh, that is so cool. I can't even thank you enough for taking time out of your vacation to talk to me today. Speaking of which, where do we find you sitting in the world?
I am based in Mumbai, in India, and I work with Priceline and manage a lot of their global learning operations. Fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to dive into that, and we'll talk about that in a second. Before we do, though, I've been using this podcast as a time capsule for the pandemic and sort of that. So I'd love to know, like, where you're sitting right now today. What's the status? I mean, we're recording this sort of in the middle of October 2021. What's the pandemic like in your part of the world?
It's getting better. The good news is that it's getting better. People are getting vaccinated. A lot of restrictions are easing up, and people feel better after months and months of isolation. So it's just getting better. The fact that I have been able to take a vacation after almost 2 years is something that I was really looking forward to. So yes,
that is so good.
Welcome respite.
Excellent. As you alluded to just a few seconds ago, you are a senior learning and development. Oh my gosh, I just completely destroyed your title. You are a learning and development specialist. That for some reason the word development didn't work for my head. I'll try that again. Actually, as you alluded to just a few seconds ago.
You want me to do that? I'm happy to do that. I can get that burden off your shoulders.
I'm going to try it again. Hithakshi, as you just alluded to a few seconds ago, you are a senior learning and development specialist at Priceline. Why don't you, I've already teed you up in the preamble to this episode, but why don't you give us the 30 seconds on who you are and what you're actually delivering for Priceline right now?
Sure. So I'm associated with Priceline as a senior learning and development specialist. Priceline is part of the Booking Holdings Group, which is the world's largest travel tech company and owns sister brands like Booking.com, Agoda, Kayak, rental cars, and OpenTable. In my role, I lead all learning initiatives for the company across geographies. And as an organization, we're constantly invested in building our people capabilities. And while we do that, we're mindful of curating a learning environment that is more inclusive and organized as well. So, in the last few months, and pandemic has changed everything for us. So we're really mindful of the fact that the kind of content that we build, the kind of work that we do in learning and development is to help people develop their capabilities, but at the same time be mindful of how they perceive it as well.
This is going to be, I'm already super excited for this conversation. I know that we don't have much time, but anyway, how has the pandemic changed the way people learn? From where you sit in the bookings group and looking across that universe, it was already an online tech company. It was already delivering online. Obviously, all of their services are online, but have there been things that have fundamentally, been altered in your perspective?
Yes, indeed. In fact, the question is pertinent as we discuss careers and the impact COVID has had on people and lifestyles as well. So the pandemic, yes, has brought with it a lot of reactive change. That is what we've observed in the way people learn and they perceive their careers. Many companies that we've observed over the last few months have had to alter their approach in the way they design people's learning journeys, in the way they design their careers, define productivity, build meaningful learning experiences, and at the same time be mindful about employees' mental health as well. So while a lot of organizations have realized that this is an opportunity for us to move virtually and accommodate a lot of learning initiatives virtually, they also have had to realize that employees' mental health is also imperative as they manage their personal and professional lives under the same roof. So practically all of us have spent a lot of time indoors, and many of us have also spent a lot of time away from our friends, family, peers. And I have been virtually onboarded at Priceline myself. So I've really not met my colleagues because of the pandemic. So on the whole, we have been leading a more isolated existence. But I think as we find our way through this gradually, learning approaches have changed as well. Webinars have replaced classroom programs. Advanced technologies have led to borderless communication, and that has increased what I have, what I fondly called as VICA, as opposed to VUCA, which is the acronym for versatility, interactivity, curiosity, and accessibility. So these have been my observations over the last few months. So I'm going to throw some light on what I feel about VICA and what is it all about, based on my immediate impressions about the entire learning and development gamut overall. So in my experience, I've observed people are now more mindful than ever about their learning journeys in the race to stay relevant, and which is why they want to experience content that is more versatile. They want to leverage their learnings in multiple ways at work. They want their experiences to be more interactive, something that can facilitate meeting of the minds. With the amount of content that is available online, they also want to sharpen their curiosity, consume more content, and be in the know of things. The whole fear of missing out is something that scares people. So they want to be in the know of things. And lastly, I've observed that people want information that is easily accessible so that it can be implemented without much effort. So therefore, I feel that employees and customers have different expectations now than it has been in the last 2 years. And this will continue to evolve as the global economy finds a stable ground for itself. People are more decisive about their career directions, and that has probably led to what we've been hearing, the Great Resignation. So it's not just the responsibility of the employees to find meaning in their work, but it's also about companies who are equally responsible to retain talent through flexible work arrangements and diversified learning opportunities. So these have been my observations.
And has this I don't want to say it's a wholesale change in how people are approaching their learning journeys and the content that they want. And it doesn't sound, it's not radically different. It just sounds like maybe there's more of an urgency behind it. I'm really interested in how are you seeing the manifestation of, I want things to be sharper, and I want to have access to more, and I want to, is that people, taking more time out of their schedules to do this? Is it people requesting time off to do more learning? Is it people saying, hey, no, look, I want to go from point A to point B in my career, and I'm going to be very, very specific about it. Like what are, again, those are examples that are off the top of my head. How are you experiencing it specifically?
In fact, all of the above, because people do want to invest in learning opportunities while they're on the job. Because at Priceline, we follow the 70-20-10 learning framework. So it gives them an opportunity to interact with people. It gives them an opportunity to network with people outside their teams as well. There are also people who prefer to take time off from their work and invest in continuous learning opportunities as well. So there are the learning space in the last 2 years has diversified in such a way that people do have a say in what they want to learn and how they would want to learn. But at the same time, it's also imperative to be mindful of what we offer as well as an organization. So long lectures or long webinars is not something that really works. 3 or 4 hour sessions over Zoom is not something that interests people. People want a bite-sized learning or micro learning strategy, something that is available on the go. And at the same time, it's immediately applicable. And this is especially true for technical skills as well, because we have a lot of technology population as well. So this is especially true for them because they want to learn technology, apply it in some simulated environment, and then go back to their work, and the application is immediate. So that is the preference. So and at the same time, like we discussed, that pandemic has changed the way people think, the way people observe or even consume information. So it's been too much for their mental health as well. And over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of emphasis on mental health. And keeping that in mind, it is not a good idea. We feel it is not a good idea to really push people towards learning opportunities. We'd rather take a pull approach, give them information that is sufficient to digest and sufficient to apply to the work that they do, and keep them happy, and also at the same time have fun and build some meaningful and engaging content.
Cool. Many of the people who are listening to this podcast right now are learning professionals. They've been in the business for a long, long time. We have a lot of people who are professors or, from the higher ed space. But there's an awful lot of people out there who are masterclass creators, and people who are interested in getting into this sort of space of learning. Start off the conversation about how Priceline creates its strategy, or what Priceline's strategy is around people development. You said the 70-20-10 rule. Like, for those of us who don't know, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back before we really talk about 70-20-10 rule. So as an organization, we strongly believe that professional development is a big deal. And with that in mind, we heavily invest in building competencies. So before we really head towards 70-20-10 rule and we talk about it to our employees, we want to get our strategy in place, and which is more around building competencies to increase productivity and allow our people to craft a meaningful career path. We believe that they are enablers to both job performance as well as business success. And our internal career architecture is called growth frameworks. And the framework includes competencies that we have designed for various job families. That is our technology and our non-technology job roles as well. So we have designed 18 general competencies, 6 leadership and 13 technical competencies that largely relate to our business objectives as a travel company. And these competencies are the foundation on which people design their career directions with their managers and identify suitable learning opportunities as well. And while people engage in these coaching discussions with their managers, we ask them to create an individual development plan to record and track their aspirations and progress. Now, as a learning function, we support this further through the 70-20-10 model for learning and development. wherein 70% is where they engage in on-the-job learning experiences. They're able to do a lot of projects. 20% is where they get opportunities through coaching and mentoring, and 10% is where we heavily invest through formal learning engagements. So at the end of the day, our aim is to mesh on-the-job learning experiences with formal learning engagements. Mm-hmm. So a strong competency framework plays a very important role in employee development. So it's not just talking about how 70, 20, 10 can fit, but we also wanted to identify what is it that we want people to develop, and those were the competencies. So that is how we strategize towards our people development. In fact, in addition to this, towards the end of September, we also announced a learning and development allowance for all our employees to pursue continuous learning opportunities. We realized that 2021 has been a tough year for everyone, and the travel industry has been hit the hardest. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, our people have been the strongest drivers of business success. And as we continue to grow and expand, we want them to be with us. We want them to invest in courses and certifications that would help them get ahead. So as the year comes to a close, we wanted them to shift gears a bit and sign up for courses and certifications that would help them get ahead and stay relevant as we prepare for busier times in 2022. So far, we've had an excellent response to this initiative and found people wanting to truly look forward to growth and development.
Well, then give us a sense, how many people are we talking about here across the bookings group? I mean, is it, I don't even want to know. Sorry, I don't even want to venture a guess. Like, are we talking 10,000, 100,000? Like what's the size of the universe that you're offering this opportunity to? And then what's the response? When you say you have a great response, is that 10% of people? Is that 50% of people? What is it?
100% of people.
100%? Wow.
Yeah, because so to answer your question, I'm referring to Priceline. We've not yet announced across the board.
Oh, okay.
But it's primarily for Priceline. We've piloted that for Priceline, and we're looking forward to doing this across other boards, other brands as well. So, but yes, we've got 100% response because we want people to invest Q4 in learning. They could take up courses, certifications. And which is why, and since we've announced it towards the end of September, we've got a lot of bulk of trainings or requests from people to approve the courses and certification that they would want to take up. So yes, so there is a demand, and as Q4 comes to a close, we're also seeing our business stabilize a bit, and people have the time to invest in learning and development, whether they want to do it outside of their working hours or whether they want to do it in parallel to the work that they do. So the response has been humongous.
Yeah, wow, that is tremendous, amazing. So what are some of the practices that you're talking about? I find really super engaging that 70% of the things where it's like, let's learn on the job and whatnot. So how does Priceline approach that, especially for a virtual workforce, in the travel business, where there's some in-person contact with your clients as you sort of go down the rabbit hole into actual service provision, but I'm guessing most people are not interacting with other humans in a real world. So how does that work? Give me an example. Are you sort of just cross-fertilizing people between departments? Is that forcing people to go on rafting trips so that they understand the experience and then they can report back about it? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So whether we're designing a course or an overall learning strategy, as an organization, our aims is to enhance social learning engagements. And 70-20-10 is in a way the format to drive social learning engagements. So we want people to have fun while they learn, and at the same time get leadership insights on professional development as well. So we recently launched our learning management system called Priceline Pathways. And our learning management system offers more than 4,000 plus pieces of content on leadership, business skills, and productivity. In addition to this, we've designed playlists that include a series of online courses, videos, ebooks, and audiobooks on technical and non-technical courses for people to experience diverse methods of learning. And people can follow these playlists and are also able to share these with their teams on company social channels like Slack or they could simply email them. So that way, people can come together as a team. They could, form some small learning cohorts and talk about some of the online classes that they've taken on the LMS. And that way, we believe that learning is more collaborative, and we're also able to gauge popularity of the content and people's interest in learning as well. In fact, people managers can also assign certain courses to their teams based on the coaching discussions that they have. And that way, we feel that there is a concrete structure to professional directions. In addition to this, we've also made some live online environments available for our technology population to put their technical skills to practice. So these interactive environments allow them to practice, make mistakes, and learn on the go as well. So people can really put their heads together and mingle with each other and talk about how they could solve a particular case study or a problem. So our aim is to also make meaningful content available for our population. And we therefore have premium content subscriptions from publishers like TED, Grovo, Viz Library, and so on. So that's what we've done with our learning management system. Another engagement that we're building this month onwards, which is October onwards, is our competency-based speaker series, where each month we deep dive into a competency from our growth frameworks that I spoke about earlier, and have a member from the leadership team facilitate a live webcast, talk about their career journeys and best practices on how people could sharpen those competencies and build a thriving career with us. So we feel this is an opportunity for people to interact with leaders and also get a mature perspective in the process. So to answer your question, overall, we've managed to put together community learning engagements through our offerings on the LMS and through our live webcast. So as we move into 2022, we plan to intensify this further.
Fantastic. I have to ask you, since we are LMS Pulse, are you allowed to, is your LMS something that you built from scratch, or is it, what platform do you use for that?
Cornerstone.
Okay, Cornerstone. Nice. That's good to know.
So
Thanks.
Cornerstone is used by our sister brands. So Priceline is the one that hadn't adopted the LMS. So which is why we've spent the last 5 months, with the entire implementation process, and now we're ready to. We've just rolled it out, and we're getting a lot of momentum on people experiencing the playlist and the content as well.
That's interesting. That's a great segue into my next question, because you hadn't adapted a learning management system. I mean, Priceline's been around for a long time. I mean, I remember William Shatner, pitching Priceline for, a long time ago. Come on. I mean, that was like a decade ago or even more. It's great. It's
and
great
with him and with him flying into space is.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, he's flying into space.
That's so
we're
awesome.
really looking forward to it.
Captain Kirk is finally going to space. But my thing is, so you just now put together your LMS and you're rolling it out, like, sort of having a global rollout for Priceline. What were you doing before? Like, how are you building, like, how did you create a learning culture beforehand? Was it just all ad hoc learning? Was this through an L&D department where was there like a learning journey that was put together by HR professionals? Like, how'd you get from point A to where you are now, and how are you continuing to evolve that?
To be honest, learning and development, the foundations of learning and development was set in about 6 months ago when I joined the organization. So we had we were a very small organization. We had a handful of people. Then came the pandemic. There was a hiring freeze, and we were not really looking forward to onboard a lot of people. But then things stabilized. Travel industry started picking up. We started doing well with other brands as well, and which is why learning and development, something that was shelved last year was reinstated this year. So I joined the organization, and then the discussions around building a learning culture or implementing the learning management system is something that we started speaking about. Also getting leadership development, coaching, executive coaching is something that we started talking about. So honestly, we're still in the nascent stages. We're still about to see a lot of changes. And like I said, we want to intensify our efforts in 2022. But until then, we're doing all that we can through our LMS. We've offered people our learning management system for people to have a lot of content, technical and non-technical content. We're doing up speaker series. So we've kickstarted a lot of things. But at the moment, since it's Q4, the focus is more on utilizing the L&D allowance, and people are really interested in certifications. But for what we built so far, we want to intensify that in 2022. So probably in my next conversation with you, I will have a lot to add to it. But but in my experience, learning cultures, in my experience that I've worked with so far, I mean, I have consulted many organizations, and I have worked within organizations as well, setting up learning and development function. I have known, I have experienced that learning cultures impact all areas of the business, whether it is productivity or retention. And developing a learning culture needs time and effort. It is not an overnight gig. So, but in the long run, it delivers impressive results. When employees are aligned with business goals, it's a substantial step towards success. And here I'm referring to employees knowing the company values, the products that we have, customers, mission, the entire organizational structure. So when there is familiarity with these elements, it's easier to build a learning culture, or it's easier to build a statement towards a learning culture. So here's what I feel. And when organizations are building a learning culture, based on my experience, before organizations can really even start building their own learning culture, they have to tear it down and build it back again. And this means assessing how employees are currently learning, what sort of resources or training materials they have, resources or training materials they have, and basically what are they learning as well, to identify what is happening at the moment. Through this research, organizations can identify learning strengths and weaknesses, and from here, before they build a strategy, they know what is working and what needs to be weeded out in the process. So, and what we've observed at Priceline is some learning is organic and informal. And we've observed that every team each team in our organization have small learning cohorts, and they discuss domain-specific topics. But it is also essential to have a structured and formalized learning process too. For example, product-related trainings, compliance and code of conduct-related programs, or onboarding programs, a robust onboarding programs. These should be planned down to the T, so that employees acquire all the knowledge that is needed right from scratch. And a lot can be built in the process. But there are hygiene factors like the examples that I gave right now. When these are in place, it's easier to multiply things and build a learning culture. I also feel one of the most important or rather common stumbling blocks businesses experience when creating a culture is putting together learning materials. There's plenty of information out there in the universe you want to offer your employees, but putting together the materials or creating it is a very big task. And this is where learning and development teams need to pull in subject matter experts and get them to recommend and create relevant content for employees. So in fact, I've been watching your videos on LinkedIn around tips for building meaningful e-learning content. And I must say, it's spot on. Believe me, I'm not saying this to make you happy, but believe me, I really feel that makes a lot of sense on how to simply give out meaningful content as opposed to a lot of information that is available on the internet. So I think a few preliminary steps like these can really kickstart the journey of building a learning culture over time. Let me know if you disagree.
No, not at all. I love the perspective. I think one thing that terrifies probably many of our learners is your perspective of tear it down before you build it again, right? That's especially as organizations grow larger, it's even, these systems become more and more complex, and, rebooting a system is a fairly heavy task. So I would be interested to sort of get comments and feedback from our listeners about how they would experience that or how they would approach doing that. But something else you said really sparked my interest that I would be interested in. You said that, there are local cohorts, little communities of practice. There's the term micro-learning is out there now, and everybody's talking about micro-learning, but this is something that we've been doing for years and years and years now, right? Hey, I need that line of code, and you kind of Google it, or hey, I want to know how to do that, in Excel, and you Google that, and so you're doing this. how is Priceline capturing these learnings from these communities of practice, or do you, in order to create a knowledge base, right? So that you don't learn the same thing over and over and over again.
So to be honest, we do have learning cohorts within the team. So for example, in Mumbai, we have our Mumbai Tech Bits committee, and they organize their internal summits, internal conferences as well. In fact, right before our call, we also had our global learning and development summit that was organized by the Bookings Group, and people across brands, or learning and development heads across brands. We gathered together and spoke about all the learning initiatives that we're doing in our span. So I think what we believe is not to really step in and identify what each and every learning cohort is doing, because that's going to be a bit overwhelming for us as a function to keep our hands and legs into the process, because we want people to have their freedom to design their cohorts and have build their own communities of practice. But what we're mindful about is what is the sort of information or knowledge we're making available to our employees. So even when I know that we have our Mumbai Tech Bits community, or we have many other learning cohorts built by other line of businesses as well, we don't particularly we're interested to know what they're doing, but we don't particularly offer, share unsolicited advice when they know what works for their business. And when I have very limited exposure, deep exposure to what they do or how they run their business. So that sort of freedom and that sort of independence is something that we give our employees. But at the same time, at a larger scale, as a center of excellence, we are mindful of the kind of strategies that we build. We're mindful of what sort of information we want to make it available. So while other teams build their learning cohorts, to support those learning cohorts, we have our learning management system. And just in case they would want any sort of content that could help them drive those learning cohorts, whether it's an online class, whether it's an audio book or an ebook, we're there to support them with the library or resources. So that is the kind of support we give them, but we allow them to take the lead when they're driving learning cohorts within their businesses.
Okay, excellent. As it's so easy to do on these conversations, it's easy to paint a picture of positivity and, everybody's behind this, and hey, you have 100% response to, your learning initiative for Q4. Where are the challenges? What are the gaps that still need to be filled? Like, what is your team looking at and saying, hey, we see this as a really big challenge and we want to overcome that? Like, what are the 2 or 3 things that are the big hurdles that you're trying to overcome?
I think we want to increase social learning engagements, because at the moment we're working virtually. We're all in our silos. Where each one or each team is doing their own thing. They have their own learning cohorts. But I think what lies ahead of us in 2022 is, how do we amplify social learning? How do we emphasize leadership development? How do we really emphasize coaching, for example? How do we bring share feedback? And what we've observed is we've hired a lot of people this year. So we've expanded a lot. Our numbers have gone up. So we've observed that managers as well as employees are new to the system, to Priceline. So we want to create some space where they could warm up to in their coaching discussions. Managers are capable to share feedback with them. So there are many things that we want to do in the process. So yes, so leadership development and social learning engagements, we want to amplify that next year.
Fantastic. So now that I'm actually quite surprised as well that you said that you've brought in a bunch of employees in a time when the travel industry was decimated. That's really interesting. So what advice do you give to these people who've just joined Priceline about how to build their own career path, about how, about how to structure it, about how to think about growth for themselves?
So I think in the traditional business setup over the last few years, many professionals have enjoyed a 30-year career under the same roof. And having this type of stability within one place allowed people to clearly plot their career direction and recognize required to move up the ladder. But that is not the case now. The life expectancy of most employees in any organization rarely exceed beyond 3 to 4 years. So like I said before, professionals are not just looking for stability, but they're also looking for meaningful work. But at the same time, it is necessary for employees to temper their expectations about their roles as well. I feel when you're open to the idea that opportunity and creativity are everywhere, and if you're willing to do the work and take the initiative, you'll find the opportunity right where you're rooted. And I feel an employee needs to really know the organization well, contribute to the role that they're doing, and go deep into into developing their competencies. And I think that is where they develop their leadership skills, their managerial capabilities as well. And many a times I've observed employees complain that their organization don't offer a learning path towards success. But what they fail to realize is that opportunities for development do exist if they take the initiative to seek them out. So instead of sitting around and waiting for an opportunity to learn something new, simple things like interacting with like-minded peers to know what is out there can help them get some exposure. It also helps when you leverage companies' learning resources, network with people outside your teams or outside your organization as well. Seek out mentors within and outside the organization, and probably throw your hat in the ring if you feel you're ready for a stretch assignment. And I think once you have a sense of what piques your interest, it's necessary that you give yourself a range of opportunities and options to explore, and that would be a step in the right direction. So whether it is to get to know the team that you aspire to work with, or volunteer for a committee, or buddy up with someone. So these are some of the ways that you could really spread your wings within the organization. And the possibilities are countless. I also feel that consciously spending some dedicated time on social media like LinkedIn adds value. We are in the know of things. We know of what latest trends impact the industry, impact the market at large. So those are some of the things that really bring a matured element to career directions. And this approach has particularly helped me when I was pivoting from investment banking to learning and development. So I wasn't a learning and development professional by birth. I started with investment banking and then moved to learning and development. So I began exploring opportunities within the organizations that I worked. And then when I felt I was ready to spread my wings, gradually it led me to work with other organizations and work in the consulting space as well after a few certifications and after my master's in psychology and instructional design.
Fantastic. My final question for you is one that I ask everyone here on the podcast, and that is, what are you most excited about for the next 6 months, or maybe even the next year? Is it there could be a shiny new object, there could be a new process, there could be a new organization that you're interested in, or a new partnership that you're excited to work with. Could be anything. Doesn't have to do, anything. Is there anything that you would give a shout out to, or something that you think is really, important for people to pay attention to over the next 6 to 12 months here?
Is it your question related to what am I excited about Priceline?
Yeah, or just, you as a learning professional, as someone who's in this space, like, I think this is so cool. This is a great new app, which is what a lot of people say. Or, this is, I really pay attention to this speaker because this person is really up and coming and they have great new ideas. Or, this is the podcast I always go to, blah, blah, blah. Other than the eLearning podcast, obviously.
Okay. So I'm exploring this app called Mensa. And I'm sure you've heard of Mensa, and it's very interesting. Small, bite-sized, 20-minute conversations on the topic of your choice. And what I realized is Mensa is picking up. It's recently launched. It's picking up pace. But I think what I really look forward to is bite-sized audio-based conversations around career, around productivity, around work life, around emotional intelligence, about relationships. So you name it, and there are topics that people discuss. It's similar to how Clubhouse is, but what sets it apart is that these are 20-minute conversations. So it's one of the apps I find interesting. I'm yet to go deep into it, but I feel it's very interesting because these are mere 20-minute conversations, not long podcasts or not long-range conversations. Simple 20 minutes where you get an opportunity to network, share your thoughts, learn from listeners, and learn from fellow panelists who come with a lot of industry exposure and a lot of value to bring to the table. So those 20-minute conversations is something that I look forward to, each day, or sometimes it's just once a week, but it's highly productive because I think audio-based learning is something that's going to pick up, and I think we might have probably many versions of Mensa as we go about with a lot of competitors coming into play. But I really look forward to Mensa, and I think that's really exciting.
Two questions about that. So is it like a TED Talk format? Like TED Talks are 20 minutes long. Like, is it kind of like that? And is it curated by Mensa, or is it like who produces the content? Can anybody in the community produce content, and then kind of it's community rated or something like that?
So this is similar to Clubhouse. You host a session and you host a 20-minute conversation, and there are people, and I could join in as a listener or as a participant, as a speaker, and you trigger a topic, for example, work-life or productivity. You trigger a topic, share your thoughts, what you feel, what you have observed on the latest trends on work-life or productivity. And then you ask, get some insights from other panelists or people who joined in as speakers as well. So these are short 20-minute conversations, and people talk about what they feel on a particular topic. So for example, what productivity means for each member on the panel, and these are timed conversations. So 5 minutes before the end of the series, before the end of the audio conversation, is where you get notifications. So you know that you have to wrap up your conversation in 5 minutes. And it's easier on the ears. It's not too much of information overload. And these are just bite-sized. So I think micro-learning is something that I see as a trend pick up over the next few months. And audio-based conversation specifically is something that I see. So only time will tell that if Mensa is going to have more competitors, because it was Clubhouse that first led the market, and then it was Mensa, and now we'll see if there are any competitors or Mensa really leads the way.
Fantastic. Hithakshi, thank you so much for taking time out of your vacation. Again, I can't thank you enough for that, but also just for putting these insights on the table. Such wonderful insights about not only how Priceline approaches learning and development, but also what the future holds. And your energy is infectious. So I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Likewise, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for having me over the show.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you heard, please do me the favor of following us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or whichever social media you prefer. Also, if you're interested in diving deeper on e-learning, I encourage you to get your free ticket to the eLearning Success Summit, where there are more than 70 hours of presentations on best practices. Just go to eLearningSuccessSummit.com. And then finally, for the latest news, information, and resources about e-learning, come subscribe to our newsletter at lmspulse.com. Thanks.